Okay, so let's go. So assumption, let's go on the assumption slide. One of the assumption you take that all the APIs are the REST API. What if that assumption is not true? Some integrations are SOAP based, some are file based. What would be your strategy?
In that case, the ESP would be able to handle that by using the proper appropriate connectors.
Connectors, or how exactly they would handle? Can you tell me one example?
So let's say the monitoring system currently has the REST API. Instead of that, they have a SOAP API. Then the SOAP API would need to be imported within the ESP, and it would basically create stub classes. And the ESP would be able to invoke the stub classes to call the SOAP API of monitoring system.
So basically, you meant transformation, right?
Yeah, I mean they will have to send an XML, and that would need to create that would need to be imported within ESP
Okay.
to create the
Can,
stub classes.
okay. Can you go on the system landscape?
Sure.
So in the system landscape, the first question I have is, I see you have TCRM outside Salesforce. Can you explain how and why?
The reason for depicting it is because it uses a completely different hardware compared to the Salesforce instances. So I thought of putting it outside to indicate that difference.
Okay. But it's actually the part of the TCRM. I mean, it's not external server or anything, right? User would be accessing that from the Salesforce directly, or what is the mechanism there?
So they would be able to access using Salesforce. Yes.
Okay. Now here, there is a design tool as well, isn't? If you go to this list of the systems,
Yes.
where is the design tool in your system landscape?
Yeah, I think I forgot to draw that. Yes.
Okay.
It should have been there.
But there is also an integration with the design tool. So if you go on your, I think, sales and the design process, they are designing everything in the design tool. Let's go in that area, sales and design.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, wait here. Perfect. Line number 6, requirement number 6. Read that requirement carefully and tell me your solution there.
So back at the office, the system specialist creates design plans with custom design tool, which could be 100 MB in size or larger and should be accessible by the customer via Salesforce. So my approach was that the system specialist would directly attach this file to the location record, which is this one, via Xfiles Pro. The Xfiles Pro would have a tab on the location record. And once they attach it, it will go and sit inside S3. And will basically expose the location object to the customer by sharing set, and they would get access to this.
Okay. So, okay, let's take a little bit step back. Tell me the whole overall process. So basically, what you are suggesting is the design tool is the isolated system. They will work there, right? And they will download the file, they will upload. But then there are multiple questions here, right? How the design tool would know for which customer they are creating a file, which location they are creating a file, and which location they have to connect the file. Everything you're suggesting is a manual.
Yeah, so I went with the simplest solution where the system specialist knows for whom they are creating that particular design. So once they use this design tool and generate a file, uh, I'm pretty much asking them like you can simply go and attach it to the location object.
But wouldn't that be a lot of learning curve, confusing, and maybe the manual errors? How do they know that which location is the right location to upload the file?
So I mean, I thought it's more like a more simpler solution in that case instead of going with automation, and more like training that needs to be provided to the system specialist to identify the correct location.
Correct, correct. But my question here is really two different system. Design system is an existing system, You are proposing the new solution, you have a new data model. What is the guarantee that the same data model, same everything is in the tool itself? What if the design tool does not have anything named as a location? What they have something like a project? What if they have a my point here is really how the manual operation would work. Do you think this is the optimal solution? I mean, what is the advantage they will get from the Salesforce if they're still working the manual on the new system?
So here the main assumption I'm making is that the design tool is going to be operated. It will exist outside of Salesforce. We don't want to bring it within Salesforce, but it's the file, the output of the design tool, which is there, the file that the system specialist can simply go and attach to the location object. I thought the automation may make this process more complicated. It's more orders we can put on the system specialist. It makes this system much more simpler.
No, so that's the question I'm saying, right? It's not a simpler because system specialist would need a lot of information from Salesforce. I mean, they cannot design in isolation, right? All the information is in Salesforce, right? Like location, geolocation, latitude, longitude, photos, and everything is inside Salesforce, correct? On the basis of that information, they want to create a design. So there is definitely dependency on the new system, right? That's the one part. Second part is even if you build the tools and everything, all the design, what is the guarantee that the system specialists are uploading at the right location? What if they are uploading that file in some another location? So basically, how the handshake between both systems are going to happen manually is going to be a lot of back and forth, swivel chair, and possibilities are error are pretty high here. So, what is your suggestion if I want to automate that process?
So one approach is we could potentially use Canvas if this design tool is cloud based, and use a Canvas implementation so that they can operate within the Salesforce sandbox itself. And through Canvas, we could use events to communicate between the design tool and Salesforce. If the design tool is cloud based, or rather, I would say server based, and it is within our control to change it, that would give a more seamless experience.
So, what exactly is the Canvas application? Why something like iframe would not work?
iframe is kind of like discouraged right now because of security concerns. And the second thing is like iframe is one way because it will just provide a view of the other application within your application. We won't be able to communicate between the iframe and the surrounding application in a more deterministic manner. We could use post messages, but the Canvas application gives a much more structured way of doing it.
And how the Canvas application would work? I mean, how that iframe problem would be solved in Canvas?
So in case of the Canvas application, we'll have to create a connected app, right? And uh, basically Salesforce would send a signed request to this Canvas application, which can then decode it using the secret and basically get a context extracted out of it. And that context can be used, which is primarily the OAuth key for backend communication, as well as through JavaScript. I
Okay.
do think the Canvas also is using iframes, but it has less security implications as compared to directly using an iframe.
And when you say security implication, what exactly is the security implication? Which one? Which security?
So it could potentially be a cross-site scripting attack if we use iframes within our pages. We kind of like expose ourselves to those kind of attacks. So that's one of the security implications.
But those attacks are automatically handled in the browsers also, right? If you set the header origin on your website, browser would take care of that one, isn't it?
Yeah. And also the user interface, I mean, the user experience may not be as good as well because it has its own borders and everything that the iframe shows up.
And can't you override those borders using CSS or something?
Yeah, I guess we can. Yeah, we can.
Okay. Let's move to the next question. Go back on the system landscape again. Now in the system landscape, I do see you have ETL tool, and then you mentioned that it has a limitation about OAuth user agent flow, right?
Correct.
Walk me through the
Yeah,
process. Walk me through the process that okay, how this OAuth would work in context of ETL, and why you're using an ETL here in your solution, where you're using ETL.
sure. So the ETL is used for one-time data migration from CRM system as well as the ERP and monitoring system before the project go live. And it is also used for regular data migration, which was needed for large data volume objects like assets we have as well as cases. So those are the two races we are using. I propose Informatica specifically here, and the problem with I won't say the problem, but it only supports OAuth user agent flow. The way it will work is that first time when you set up this connection between Informatica and Salesforce, the user would need to do the authentication, the consent, which is there. But after that, it would be very seamless if we make sure that the refresh token expiry is kind of like forever.
So, few questions I have on this approach. Okay, number one, is user agent OAuth flow is the secure and the safe, uh, and is the user agent flow recommended for something like in this scenario, or the user agent is just for the mobile?
So I take it back. I think I made a printing mistake here. It should be like web server flow, not the user agent flow. OAuth web server flow here.
Okay, okay. So now let's go back to the web server flow. You mentioned about infinite refresh token time frame, right? But there could be the multiple reasons refresh token could get invalidated by the Salesforce, right? Sometimes because of the update, maintenance, right? There is no guarantee that refresh token would always be alive. So what is the mechanism to handle those edge cases scenario?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Uh, it's like when I looked into Informatica, they were just supporting this thing. I may use a different tool if this is a real problem. I may definitely use a different tool instead of Informatica.
Okay. Okay, let's go on your integration strategy, all the integration pattern that you have. Now, in this integration pattern, integration number 5, integration number 6, right? There are few integrations where you have a remote call-ins, correct? Like integration number 1, integration number 2. Sorry, integration number 1, for example, best example, right? In the remote call-in, okay, why you are using an ESB? Why not ETL? What is the design or decision in your solution when you are deciding to use ESB versus ETL?
Sure. So I generally propose to use the ESB if the volume of operations is low in the thousands. So here we have the contractors which are around 6,000. So the volume of operation is pretty low. So ESB makes more sense in this case. And it is more transactional flow which is present. I would have used ETL if the number of data points that need to be updated or inserted is probably in tens of thousands.
Hmm. So during the data migration, initial data migration, you're already loading the data in Salesforce. You're already having all the transformation, all the logic in ETL, correct? And you're loading the full data. Now in this requirement number 1, for an example, it's just a partial data. Why not to reuse that integration? Why to rebuild that integration again in ESB?
Uh, right. So so ETL is also bringing in the contractor data into
Mhm.
Salesforce as part of the integration.
Initial data migration, yes, that's the solution you propose, right? In the data migration. So that's my question.
Yeah. It's just like the volume was one of the factors. I think it may make sense to reuse that one because it will also it can also work for low volume migration. It's not necessary that only it has to be used for high volume. It's preferred, but if it's already there in the mix, I think I would reuse it. I did not think about that. I would reuse that migration.
Okay. Let's go on the system landscape again. In a system landscape, what is your mobile? I see you have hybrid mobile for the customers, correct?
Correct.
Can you walk me through how the hybrid mobile works, and more importantly, why you decided to go with the hybrid mobile? You have only 4 months time frame to release this product.
Right. So the reason for going with hybrid mobile was the requirement for barcode scanning.
Okay.
So for that, we'll need a specialized uh, JS package. Let me just check. I think we could do that using mobile publisher as well. Let me just check it once. Yeah, I think I made it by mistake. It should be mobile publisher. We could use this JS library on the standard Salesforce mobile as well application, and we could simply reuse that.
And what is the mobile publisher?
So mobile publisher will be used in order to provide custom branding because we have external customers as the users of the system.
Why not a standard Salesforce mobile application?
The standard Salesforce mobile application would have a standard Salesforce user interface, which may not be customized. And we are kind of like, we definitely want to have branding and our organization look and feel.
Is that the only reason, or there is some other limitation as well in the Salesforce? Like, how about community? Does it support community or Experience Cloud?
I think it does support. It does support
Sorry, let
Experience
me
Cloud.
explain my question. I'm not talking about the mobile publisher. I'm talking about the Salesforce mobile app, standard Salesforce mobile app. Does it support community out of the box?
So you have this option to switch the URL, right, of the org.
Hmm.
In that, you could provide a custom URL for a community, and then it would give you the login for that. And through Salesforce mobile app, and the custom URL for the community, you could log in through Salesforce mobile.
Okay, good, good. Coming back to here, so I see you are talking about some JavaScript component for the barcode scanning. Can you zoom in a little bit more detail? What JavaScript component you are talking here, which supports barcode scanning?
Sure. So in this case, I thought of using the Salesforce barcode scanner API, which is available in LWC, but that is still in beta. So I would discourage using it in a production environment.
Mm-hmm.
As a counterpart of it, we'll have to search for some barcode scanning JS package, which would basically identify the barcode and return that as a response in our JavaScript function, which represents the unique ID associated with the barcode. And once that is in our JavaScript function, we can make an AJAX call back to Salesforce using maybe Force TK or some other library to create these assets.
Okay, again, coming back to the same question, you have just 4 months and you are again suggesting the custom development. Is there any configuration or something that can be used to achieve this requirement?
Uh, so one thing I thought about this was since we have a MVP for the first 4 months, we may not need to actually implement it. It could be like a separate requirement which may come later on that can obviate the problem associated with the timeline. That's one thing.
Okay, can you think of any App Exchange product or anything for that? You are already using some App Exchange products here.
I'm not aware of specific App Exchange product, but if something like that is available, I would definitely use it.
Okay. Okay, let's go on your licensing. Kedar. What is the license you choice for the contractor and why?
So the license choice I gave to the contractor was partner because of the need to access code.
Okay.
And yeah, so I think while going through the presentation, when I was giving the presentation, I realized probably they do not need access to the code. I mean, I cannot justify it.
Okay, so are you suggesting some change here?
Yeah, I'm suggesting to change this.
Okay, and what
Yes,
is
they
the
don't need access to code.
new license? What would be the new license here?
I would go with uh, customer community license, because at least they would need access to the case and the work order, both of them. So I would go with a customer community license for the vendors, so for the contractors, as they do not need access to the code.
Okay, so you're going partner for the customer community license. Okay, let's go on the security and the visibility. And security and the visibility requirement number. Let's wait here. Yes, explain me requirement. Is there any implication on your solution or 4?
So number 4.
Mm-hmm.
So here I'm changing the contractor to CC, customer community,
Mm-hmm.
right? And as far as the locations are concerned, which need to be exposed, I can use a sharing set, because the location has a lookup to the specific contractor. So we could use a sharing set to share the location with that particular contractor. We don't need code anymore, and finance objects should not be shared at all. So this would work even
Okay.
for the customer community license assigned to the contractor.
Okay. Scroll down on the reporting section. Yeah, wait here on the reporting. Okay, perfect. That's fine. Now here is the scenario. Okay, in the same follow up to the same question where you are changing a license to the customer community. You have assumed in your solution that only one contractor would be working at a location at a time. Okay.
Correct.
But what if the customer is having a multiple projects going on for the same location? What if the same location have a multiple contractors? How would your solution work?
So we could do that using a junction object, potentially, where you could assign multiple contractors to the same location.
So when you use the word junction object, are you talking about two master detail you will have or two lookup you will have?
Let's see. So we have location and we have this person account, which represents the contractor. And I would use a junction object between these two so that we can have multi relationship. So I would not, I generally don't use master detail unless it's really not needed because of locking problems that may get associated with it. The master record is always locked when the child record is updated. So I generally prefer lookup unless it is really important. So here I will go with lookup.
Okay, and that lookup would be between location and?
So I will have a location to contractor junction, and the lookup should be from this object location to junction to location as well as the person account or the contact which is there.
Okay, as we are already in this page, Kedar, scroll a little bit again and go on the security again. And in the security requirement number 5, okay, so let's say there are multiple customer accounts. Customers are associated with the multiple accounts, and let's assume that the account have a hierarchy like 3 level up. Assume. Do you still think your ACR solution would work in that situation? Read requirement number 5 again, and let's say there is a multiple account hierarchy.
I think so. So let's assume like we have 3 accounts: account 1, account 2, and account 3, and each of them have a primary customer contact underneath it. So what I propose to do is that each of those primary customer contacts would be in an account contact relationship with the other accounts.
Okay. So yeah, sorry. So you have 3 account. So each account will have 3 ACR. So 3 multiplied by 3.
That's right.
And how would that happen? And who will create those many ACR records? What is the process?
So here I think it is the responsibility of the ETL to create that information when we are kind of like dismantling the CRM system and bringing this data. It's the responsibility of ETL to create this hierarchy.
And what about, so that's the one time, but what about the new contractors getting added, new contacts getting added? What would happen that at that time? Who will take the responsibility?
You mean new customers getting added? New
Yes.
customers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we could capture that information as part of the lead or some other custom objects, and we can have an automation that can create this thing through
Walk me
flow or something.
walk me through the process. When you yeah, what is exactly concrete process? How it would be handled in the lead?
Uh, so let's say we have a primary customer account already created, account one already created. On the lead object, we will need to capture what is the parent of that, some way, like maybe have a lookup relationship already with the lead, or it
Sorry,
could just be.
yeah, sorry, Kedar. Sorry to stop you there. You are talking about lead, and then you are saying account would already exist. So can you walk me through how the lead and account, how the account exists before lead? What is that process?
Yeah, so what I meant was, let's say we have three accounts in a hierarchy: account one, account two, and account three. And account one is already created within the system that represents the topmost account within the account hierarchy for that whole customer. And we may get like a new subsidiary, and that is kind of like a lead. So that would need to be get attached to that particular first account. So we'll have to make that relationship. We'll have to build that relationship based on the data that is captured on the lead in some manner.
Okay. Okay. Now, in your data model, I see location. Okay. So when the lead is converted, at that time, or what in that whole life cycle, where the location is getting created and how?
Sure. So I assume like the lead would be assigned to a support rep, and the support rep would then uh, create the account and a contact, basically use lead conversion to create a business account. So as part of the account creation, we can have an after save flow that would take the lead data, which is basically representing maybe the location, and create that location record as part of the after save flow.
Okay. Okay. So that I'm done with the security solution. Let's go. Sorry, I'm done with the system security. L- let's little bit work on the report itself. Okay. So in the
Sure.
reporting, can you explain me your solution or reasoning basically for requirement number two and requirement. So let's talk about requirement number two. Why you are suggesting TCRM here?
Yeah. So the primary reason for doing Tableau CRM here is these numbers that I've kind of like found out. So over a 5-year period, we have around 14 million or 29 million within that range assets, and around 5 million plus cases over a 5-year period. So as part of my long-term strategy, I'm archiving them off storage inside the EDW. So the data is going to reside in two systems. One is Salesforce as well as the enterprise data warehouse. And we need to have singular reporting, uniform reporting. So that's the reason for using Tableau CRM.
So if you read requirement number two, they are saying that they want to see monitoring event. Correct. Are you keeping the monitoring event data inside Salesforce or the monitoring event data is outside Salesforce?
So this information, the way I interpret it is that the assets represent those devices which are at a customer's location.
So
And the
asset is
monitoring systems may also contain additional information regarding, because they would be getting data every second, maybe, or every minute. So the monitoring system is also containing that data. But the real events are the issues that are reported, which could be like a subset of all the events the monitoring systems capture. So we need to build report on those cases as well as on the assets associated with them, which are again linked to the locations, which then provide a holistic view.
okay. Can you explain me solution to five and walk me through end-to-end solution?
Sure. So in this case, we have a need of live reporting. So the website that is there, maybe it's built in React or some other framework, but at a very basic level, it is going to use JavaScript with some kind of like mapping and charting package. Once this website is accessed by a user, at that point of time, the JavaScript backend would make a call to the ESP, and the ESP would then get this data from the enterprise data warehouse or through Salesforce and send it back as a JSON payload. And the JavaScript backend then can render this in whatever charting library is needed. Now
So
we
sorry, sorry, Tuar. Just on the requirement number two, you mentioned what is the meaning of monitoring event, correct? And the requirement number four, if you read carefully, is really the extension of two itself. So read carefully two, read carefully why five, and tell me the solution for five.
okay. So in number 5, we are basically showing the same thing, but it's region based. It's across US and Canada. And it's just like one final number we have to show. While in number 2, it is more granular, which is based on customers and probably on the locations. So they basically bring the same data, which is essentially the cases which are reported around security breaches.
Yeah, so before you answer, you just mentioned that ESB would go to Salesforce and ESB will also go to the EDW, right? So the first question is, does ESB really need to go to EDW if the data and the report is already on the point number two, right? So what is your solution? You already have your data, you already have your Tableau CRM dashboard built there. Just few filter here and there. The question is, can ESB access the Tableau CRM APIs?
Yeah, I'll have to. I don't know whether they can access it, but if it's able to access it, then I would reuse that API which is already there on a TCRM. That would be a better solution.
Mhm. You are using a word EDW multiple times. Can you go on your system landscape, Kedar, and show me where is the EDW in your solution and which system is that system? I mean, what is it? Azure? Is it a data lake? GCP? Which one is that one?
Sure. So EDW here, I'm assuming is cloud based, and it is Amazon Redshift. So reason for doing that is because you will have like less maintenance if you implement it on premise. You don't have to worry about hardware scaling. So
Mhm.
Amazon Redshift is my assumption.
So now EDW you are also using for the data archiving as a part of your LDV strategy that you showed, right? Long-term EDV strategy.
Correct.
So if the user wants to see the historical data and that historical data is in EDW, how would you display that historical data from EDW to Salesforce?
Sure. So for that, I propose to use Salesforce Connect, which would virtualize this data from EDW back into Salesforce. For example, the cases or the assets.
And would Salesforce Connect automatically work with EDW directly with Salesforce? I'm not sure how that whole process would work between EDW and Salesforce Connect.
So ESB would act as the translation layer. So whatever API is there for EDW, it would actually use that API and then have an implementation, which is an OData implementation on ESB. And then we can definitely have Salesforce Connect configured on Salesforce to connect with the OData implementation exposed by the ESB. ESB has to act as a mediator.
Okay. So again, in your answer, if you see, right, there's so many overheads happening here, right? Basically, ESB scope is increasing because now ESB has to translate all the interaction between EDW and Salesforce via an OData. So the question is there any native product Salesforce has that can resolve this problem?
So we could use like something like own backup, which is there, right? The App Exchange product like own backup. Or the other option we have is big objects. which could be used for archival purposes.
Okay.
But they would need, those are the options typically we could use as well.
Do you think Heroku might be useful here?
Yes, Heroku is also useful because it also provides Heroku Connect and Salesforce Connect capabilities and automatic, I would say, bi-directional connection, REST API connection.
So you give me a lot of options. Kedar, what is your final solution here?
So my general idea was that Heroku should be used more for application-based development. You need to run servers and all, but not necessarily as an EDW. So I would prefer to go with an EDW which is really scalable and usable in the future, a dedicated EDW. So I would still go with Amazon Redshift. There will be some overhead initially involved, but it can be counted.
Okay. Okay. Let's talk about X Files Pro. What is the reason you went with X Files Pro?
Sure. The primary reason for X Files Pro was these numbers that I found out. So the available file size based on the licenses we have is around 7 terabyte. If we do the multiplication. And if I make an assumption that the design files are around 300 megabyte, and there are some additional files as well. And if we check that against the number of locations, how many such files would be there, that number comes out to be 60 terabyte. So our expected file size once we go live with all these information at the end of 1 year is around 60 terabyte, and we have 7 terabyte of storage. So X Files Pro coupled with Amazon S3 would kind of like be the best solution here.
Okay. Sales and design requirement number 7.
Seven. Okay.
Here you're talking about chapter 5. Okay.
Yeah, chatter for collaboration. Yes.
Okay. Chapter for collaboration. So again, 4-month project. You're introducing X Files Pro, new system, right? What is your strategy on rolling out? How the data migration would be handled, and what is the sequence of the data migration if you have X File Pro in your solution?
Sure. So X Files Pro, basically the data migration would be for the design files that need to be taken from the desktop and loaded into or need to be exposed in Salesforce in some manner. So the first step during that process would be to collect these files across multiple desktops, which we currently have across users, and put them in a shared network drive or folder. Once that is done, the ETL will connect to this network drive or folder. I'm making an assumption that the files are going to have some kind of customer context in the form of email, which uniquely identifies that customer. So the ETL would basically read each of these files. At the same time, the information would be already migrated by the ETL about the customers, which is essentially the account contacts. So it would read this file name, and it will also take the data from Salesforce, and it will try to match between those two. And if it finds a match, then it would create this file in AWS with that specific Salesforce record ID based on that mapping in a separate folder, and it insert those files inside this. Now, once X Files is configured, it basically needs that Salesforce ID and a folder location on the AWS. And once that linking is done, it will be able to show those files on the correct record directly.
Okay. Let's go on the project lifecycle and open your environment strategy slide. Yeah, here, what are the different type of the sandboxes you have in your environment strategy, and why?
Sure. So I'm having like the scratch out for individual developers to work on. Then we have this CI environment, which is a dev sandbox for integration testing, automation regression testing that would be done. Then a QA environment is in a dev pro where the functional testing, Selenium, low data migration is done. User acceptance testing is done in a partial sandbox primarily. The stage is having full copy, and we are doing performance and load testing there. And the prod is again full copy where smoke testing is done. For hotfix, it's basically a simple dev environment where the bug fixes are done.
Okay. So you mentioned that you have Scratch or for the developers, correct? Now in your solution, you have a tons of App Exchange product. You have X5 Pro, you have Conga, you have DocuSign, you have SMS Magic, and developers definitely needs to work on the extending them, changing the behavior. What is your strategy of handling those in the Scratch org? Because as a definition, it seems you're going to recreate Scratch org every day or maybe every week. How would you handle those overhead in Scratch org?
So I would recommend like we should not do that in the Scratch org, but install those packages in the CI environment so that we don't need constant installation and deletion on the Scratch orgs. So we could simply install it there, and these are essentially configuration based. So the developers can use it here if needed.
So, what is the purpose of CI org here?
It is for running regression, automated regression tests,
Exactly.
fix and
So,
jest based.
exactly. So you're running tests here. You're not building anything. But if you're installing all the App Exchange products here, let's say SMS Magic product you have to build a flow, uh, little bit customization, low configuration, and using that flow, you have to send an SMS. Just an example I'm giving. There could be a number of other reasons like integrating contract with Conga, DocuSign, right? How those things would be developed and configured. Are you asking developers to go to the CI org and do development there?
Right. Well, I mean, in that case, I will have to figure out a way how to install those packages on the Scratch org. I get your point. I mean, it would not be the right solution there. Or basically uh, go away with the Scratch orgs and ask the developers to use dev environment, dev orgs itself.
Okay, let's talk about a little bit on the branching strategy here you have. Uh, which branch is used to deploy to production?
So the release branch is used for that. The master branch here.
Okay, so master branch would be created first and then the deployment would happen, or first the deployment would happen and then the master branch would be merged from some other branch?
So we'll have to create a master branch first, then do
Okay,
the deployment from the master branch.
but what, okay, so let's say you already created a master branch, okay, and then you're using a master branch for the production deployment, okay. But what if some issue occurs? Okay, last time validation error happens, and you're not able to deploy. Maybe you have to pull some user stories at the last moment. How would that happen?
So if it's like a bug that needs to be fixed, I would use a hotfix environment to fix that and then deploy to production. But if it's like user stories that need to be done, then they would need to be. I mean, it really they would need to be like they need to be propagated from the dev environment, dev branches, the feature branches and dev branches, right from the beginning, to ensure that all these branches have the same count of code.
Okay, what is your testing strategy, testing methodology here?
So it's a mix of manual as well as automation testing. The automation testing is powered by Selenium, and important functional testing is done by QAs, while the developers are doing Apex testing as well as Jest testing for LWC components.
In your whole solution, where is the LWC component you have?
No, I don't have an LWC. I will take it back. There's no need for LWC just testing. I'm not having any LWC.
Okay. Can you mention about Moscow framework? Can you talk a little bit more about what exactly is the Moscow framework?
Sure, it's primarily used for backlog prioritization. The Moscow basically stands for the needs that you have within the project, which are the must-haves, should-haves, could-haves, and won't have at all. And then our backlog can be prioritized based on that, and it then gives an output of the things we need to work on priority.
Okay. Can you go on your governance model, the other slide?
Sure.
What is the CCB here?
Sorry, I couldn't catch your last part. Can you repeat?
What is CCB in this diagram?
CCB is Change Control Board.
Okay, and who would own the Moscow in this whole governance?
So I think it is owned by the steering committee and the PMO. They would have a way of saying which is more important for the project.
And what is the role of change control board?
The change control board's main role is to prevent scope creep from happening, like last minute requirements being embedded in the project, whether they should go ahead or not. So they will also be part of, I mean, it's a collective. They will also be part of the Moscow. They will also have a say in that. But that's one of the main things. Prevent scope creep and ensure change requests are approved and sent ahead.
Okay. And who would own RASI in your governance model? RASI.
So that's the part of PMO, Project Management Office.
And what exactly is the P? Is it a one person, multiple person? What are the roles and the responsibility? Everything is PMO is doing, or the other team members are also doing something here?
Right. So RASI will be created by PMO, but other team members will also be involved as per their roles. For example, there could be representation from technical architecture side or business analyst who would be part of RASI or the decision makers.
So now, see, here is the thing. You are saying Moscow, also everybody would be involved. RACI, everybody would be involved. Isn't that a huge confusion? Who is the one ownership board for the Moscow and the RACI in your governance model?
So for RASI, it is PMO. They are going to own it. And for Moscow, I mean, they will be multiple members will be part of it. But I would say this steering committee will have the maximum say in that because they are the people who decide the priority and set up the vision.
So you're saying that the steering committee will decide the priority at the each user feature, user story level? Because that's the
overall grand priority, the strategic vision, which is there.
But Moscow is not that level, right? You mentioned that Moscow, you are going to establish that what is must to have, good to have, and all the stuff. So is it really the steering committee going to handle Moscow or some other team?
I would say, like again here, the business owners would be the primary people who would be responsible for it, and they are generally part of. They could be part of PMO or COE.
Isn't that the risk for your whole governance itself? I mean, you have a governance to resolve the risk, but your governance model itself is the risk because there is no clear roles and the responsibility on this whole framework.